Hi, everyone. I'm Lourdes Turrecha, founder of the Rise of Privacy Tech, or TROPT. Welcome to the TROPT Webcast. We are doing a series on the TROPT Privacy Tech Stack White Paper 2022. It's our follow-up to last year's foundational white paper that defined the emerging privacy tech industry. And just like last year, we're featuring expert insights in the white paper and releasing the background interviews from which we sought out these expert insights from domain experts like our guest today. So I'm very excited to introduce not just one of the leading CPOs in Silicon Valley, but also a dear friend and old colleague of mine, Paola Zeni. Paola, welcome to the TROPT Webcast. Paola is the CPO at RingCentral currently.
Thank you, Lourdes. Thank you for having me. I'm equally excited to talk about privacy technology with someone like you who is so knowledgeable and so involved in this.
And likewise, the feeling is mutual. I particularly, I want to jump into my questions, but I'm going to pause and kind of give the audience the benefit of getting to know you and catch up a little bit. Paola and I, so for background, Paola and I worked at Palo Alto Networks together. This is before I jumped into privacy tech. So as many of you might know, Palo Alto Networks is the leading cybersecurity industry, the leader in the cybersecurity industry. It's adjacent to privacy tech. So we see a lot of privacy tech solutions that actually play in between cybersecurity and privacy tech and try to get both budgets, CISOs and CPOs. But before we jump into the privacy tech questions, Paola, I'd love for you to share with everyone else how you got into privacy. First, privacy, your practice as a privacy professional, and now CPO. And then as a follow-up to that, how you got interested in the emerging privacy tech industry.
Yes, I was a commercial attorney and privacy in Europe and in a technology company. I was with Hewlett Packard at the time, and privacy was rising as a legal issue in Europe. And when I had multiple responsibilities. When you're the sole counsel in an entity, you do everything. And when privacy started coming up, I was curious and interested, and started learning more about it, and started adding it to my responsibilities and spending more and more time doing it. And in so doing, I established my reputation also outside of Italy with Hewlett Packard and Agilent here in the United States, which is what ultimately then led to a full-time career in privacy. And the reason why I liked privacy is the same reason why I like it today. I like the fact that it's very complex legally. So for a lawyer, and I'm commented very much as a lawyer, for a lawyer, it's exciting and challenging. And it's also, I also like the fact that it's incredibly cross-functional. It touches pretty much every business process in a company. And so I get to work with everybody across the company. So those are the two things that drew me in. And I did privacy as part of my responsibility until 2004, when I was here in the United States, started working for Agilent Technologies. And that was my first full-time privacy gig. And then the arriving at the CPO was more because I also like the programmatic component of it, which is the part of liking the work with everybody across the company, turning it into a program and, really making a difference in the business of the company. That's what drew me to this kind of role.
Thank you for sharing that. And then I know that you're also now advising privacy tech startups. So I'm curious, as a follow-up, what got you interested in, you've worked with cybersecurity companies, other type of companies in tech, but what got you interested in privacy tech, this emerging space in general?
Well, self-interest, obviously, because I don't think there can be a solution to the privacy issues that there's not, if technology doesn't help. There's no way we're going to be able to solve this with policies and training and education and awareness. I mean, all absolutely important and helpful, but the technology has to help, because technology is part of the problem, so technology has to be part of the solution. And I find also fascinating so I always hope that out of this advising, I'll find my Prince Charming, and but also I think it's important to really help, to provide that insight experience. And when I talk to the startups, I very much put on my buyer's hat, and I say, hey, you're talking to me as a CPO. These are the things I would be asking. These are the problems I need to solve. What can you do for this? So that's.
Well, that actually gives me a follow-up question that I like to ask. It wasn't on my list of questions, but what are some of the pain points that you share with startups that you want a solution for? Because I agree, like, I just had this conversation with VMware CPO Stuart Lee, and he said the same thing. And his point really was not only that technology has to be part of the solution, because it is part of the problem. We have mounting privacy technical debt from decades of building technologies without privacy in mind. But also technology will help us scale the solution, because we've had spreadsheets and
Right.
we have policies, and those are important too. But in order to scale, tech will help us get there, especially because there's a huge shortage of privacy professionals.
Right. So the things that are the biggest challenge are when companies are dealing with proprietary environment and legacy systems. So when you're looking to put together a ROPA to do any form of scanning of your environment, obviously the technology that is part of the problem is the legacy technology that, as you said, was built without privacy in mind. So I definitely I ask that question. Okay, I understand you're going to be able to solve my problem for some of my SaaS solution. You're going to be able to scan the applications that I manage through Okta, but what about everything else? What are we going to do for that? So there's that. That's one question. Another question, which I think is maybe one of the challenges for privacy tech, and one of the difficulties for privacy tech, is that unfortunately there are different privacy problems that CPOs have to solve. Consent management is one of those, but ROPA is another one, DSAR is another one, managing the cookies is another one. So you put them all together, and then obviously if you have startups coming up with a bunch of different bricks that you're supposed to buy all of them in order to have a building or to have a solution, obviously that makes it more expensive and more challenging. So obviously my questions are a lot about, how do you integrate? Do you integrate with other offerings, or do your offerings integrate in a way that's relatively seamless and hopefully not too expensive? Because CPOs generally don't have a huge budget to spend in technology. So those are the questions that I tend to ask.
Yeah, the interoperability and integration are two of the biggest challenges that we reported on last year in last year's white paper. And even talking to this year's experts and buyers, they're still coming up. They're a problem that I don't think we're going to solve for a while. Like even in cybersecurity, right? Like cybersecurity is 10, 15, 20 years ahead. And CISOs make the same comment about needing their tools, needing interoperability and integration is like a big thing. So I think this is hopefully one of those things that we can learn and solve earlier on, as opposed to waiting 10, 15, 20 years to solve that problem. But just looking at the adjacent industry, it seems to be a problem in adjacent industries as well. But it really is a problem here in privacy tech too, because it's so early.
Yeah, and it's so much so that I think in cybersecurity, there are actually business that are starting to help with that. So that you, because the interoperability doesn't exist, there is something that you layer on top of all your tools to help you manage and orchestrate all the different tools that you're using. Which shows that the problem is real, because otherwise there wouldn't be a solution like that, but also shows that you have to kind of solve it top down with something that covers, instead of being able to solve it as part of to have it as part of the solution. Yeah. This
is actually a fascinating topic in privacy tech, because I'm seeing some of the early startups go from a platform perspective very early on. And I'm like, oh, maybe they did learn in cybersecurity. Their founders come from cybersecurity. So I'm like, maybe they're trying to address it early on. But talking to buyers, even though they're going the platform approach where they have all of these solutions instead of just focusing on one, I guess the problem still persists because of the maturity of each solution too. So there's that, like, even if you have a platform for it, not each of the solution is one company might be very good at DSARs, even though they have other offerings. So you still end up doing the best in breed type of thing, as opposed to going to one quote unquote platform because not all of their solutions are mature yet. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes.
which is an interesting conundrum for privacy startups, which is, do you want to specialize and become really, really good at one of these things and try to establish some leadership in the market and in that, or do you go for an approach that meets as many of those that addresses as many of those business processes as possible at the risk of maybe being slower or maybe not being as excellent because you stretch the very thing. So
that's I mean, that's something that we've heard from buyers complain about certain solutions out there where, they go the platform approach and they're like, well, they're really good with one solution, but the rest of them just weren't as mature enough. And they can't be because the industry is so nascent that we're just not going to get there. I think time will get us there, obviously, but it's just so early on. Speaking of challenges, I'm curious. So one of them, is legacy systems, and I couldn't agree more. The scope of some of these tools, especially the data mapping, it's tricky, right? Like some of them address certain types of systems, but not others. And I don't know that we'd ever get to 100%. So like, how do you think about it? Do you pick what's the best one out there, even though they only target 80, or do you get two tools, or what's your approach when it comes to that?
Oh, I think that the approach that I think is going to be more, at least for me, is going to be a patchwork. It's a bit of a hybrid. Let's call it hybrid. A patchwork is not a very nice word.
Hybrid approach. Yeah.
Which is using technology and using like scanning technology for the environments and the systems that lend themselves to that. And then I am afraid for the legacy environment and some of those other environments will stick to the manual approach and continue with manual.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That seems to be the reasonable way to go until the industry and the products mature to address those legacy systems. You had mentioned buyers earlier, and so I'm curious, what are some of the advice that you have for buyers out there when it comes to budget? Like you mentioned how that's maybe let's take a few steps back. You talked about how privacy tech buyers and CPOs, especially if you're sitting under legal, don't have the budget or as big as a budget comparatively if you look at CISOs and CIOs and CTOs, right? And so how do you go about that internally? That seems to be such a hot topic amongst CPOs. Like at our summit in June, that was one big hot topic that other Silicon Valley tech CPOs commiserated together over. And so I'm curious, like, what's your approach when you're trying to get buy-in for budget and resources internally for privacy tech?
So obviously you have to have established a relationship with these other leaders. So you have to have a good relationship with the CIO, with the CISO, with the CTO that enable you to make a business case for, hey, we can help each other, or there are synergies here. And for instance, I've seen that when looking at some data governance platform that could help with ROPA. And so that, or other scanning tools that may help with classification for purposes of security. So you definitely establish the relationship with those leaders first. Then you identify the opportunities for synergies, and then you just go and try to persuade them. It is not easy because most solutions tend to be fairly specialized. So it's not easy to find something that would make the CISO super happy or specifically meet exactly what the CISO needs and then exactly what I need. So obviously one of the advices is sometimes be happy with good enough. You may not get the perfect tool, but if you're able to leverage something that someone else is using, for instance, I have an example on vendor management and vendor selection and due diligence and vendor management. this is a process that information security also owns. And if they found something, it may not be exactly what works for privacy, or it may not be what is normally used by most companies for on the privacy front. But if it meets like 90% of what you need, it could be a good way to save money and build goodwill, and then be able to say, okay, I'm using your tool. Why don't we go with another process? Why don't we go with mine? And
yeah, I like that crafty approach of finding ways to share the budget or use existing tools that other organizations might already pay for. And that's an approach that we certainly see with others, right? Like sometimes they split the budget. What about when it comes to pure privacy tools that none of the other, and these, I think the category that comes to mind here under our tech stack is the program management types that are purely privacy, like I guess PIAs is one of them, where a lot of the analysis is really privacy analysis. There's a little bit part of security that could overlap with security reviews. But I'm curious, like for tools that no one else is going to want to use and you have to pay for, how do you go about advocating for a budget internally? What's your advice for others who are coming after you, who are newer and don't have as much experience when it comes to talking to leadership?
So I think there are two things that would be important. One thing is obviously you have to find the money first. So you have to look at your budget and figure out whether there is something you can give up. You say, okay, I'm going to give up something else, or maybe try to save on outside counsel cost, or maybe save on something else. For instance, if you find that you're paying for a very expensive off-the-shelf training, you may decide, maybe I could save this money and just develop an internal training and then roll it out. And it may even be more effective as a training because it's custom and it's internal, and then use that budget. So if you can find at least some of that money, that would help. So find the money. And then the other argument would be find the data, meaning can you find information that is going to show the ROI?
Mm-hmm.
For the PIA, it's not super easy, but if you had someone dedicated to those and you could figure out how much of this person's, what's percentage of this person's time that's spent in doing this, and how much you would save through the automation. So you would need to do that. So, and it's easier. For certain processes, it's easier. For instance, I know if you think about DSAR, dealing with these manually is much easier than say, hey, this is how long it takes. This is how many people are involved. It takes like 2 months, and there are like 10 people who need to be. So automating it, it's easier to make a case, and it's a no-brainer. For other that are exclusively, like for instance, the PIA is one of those. The way in which you could try, and that's where the interoperability of the tools would help, is if you were able to use a tool that starts from, I don't know, a vendor review or vendor assessment, and kind of seamlessly feeds into a PIA, the information that you're collecting when you're looking at a vendor. Because in a world where a lot of the tools that we use are SaaS, you go to a purchase sometime, right? So when you acquire those and you run the vendor through all your privacy assessment, if that could kind of seamlessly translate into a PIA or a DPIA, that would be very helpful.
Thank you for that. So going back to founders who are building in this space, or just operators, right? Like their sales team, marketing teams. So the privacy tech startup people who are reaching out either to pitch you or demo. What are some of the advice that you're like that come to mind? Like sometimes there are, I'll give you an example. So other interviews, other CPOs that I've talked to would, for example, say they really need to know their target audience. Like some of these sales and marketing tactics are not very privacy friendly. So their advice would be around kind of tailoring those sales and marketing outreach to an audience that's very sensitive to privacy. So I'm curious, like, are there other things that come to mind to you when it comes to like how they can pitch you effectively?
Okay. So I go in a completely different direction, because to
Sure.
me, given that the market is still immature, and a lot of companies are coming to a potential customer, a potential client, when their offering is also not very mature. And that's the reality. I think this is maybe a turnoff
Oh
for a
yeah.
number of CPOs, right? So
Yeah.
I think instead of trying to appear more polished and mature than you are, why don't you try to take advantage of the fact that you're not mature, and therefore you're more flexible, you're more adaptable, and you can really establish a relationship with a potential customer where a customer is really a partner, and the partner, and you're going to get a lot of feedback, which we know feedback is a gift, and in this case it should be really taken as such. And so you get a lot of feedback, you're going to get input, you're going to get mileage on your offering, because you're going to test it on the road, and then you'll be able to say, hey, I partnered with this and that and the other, and this is what made my offering better. So kind of don't play the maturity card, because you don't really have it, but
No,
play
you
the
don't.
maturity to turn that into an option for flexibility and for more adaptability. Obviously, the challenge in doing this is that this is not a very scalable approach. So you cannot do it with hundreds of customers. Obviously, you will have to pick and choose if you want to have, for instance, players in some key markets, in some key industries, and then you target those, and you go like, hey, I really want to become best in class to help like the companies in the finance space. Would you be my partner? And obviously that means that you should be very flexible also with the economics of this kind of offering, and be mindful of the fact that you're giving, but you're getting, and you're not getting just paid, which I understand. When you're at the beginning of your life, clients are your survival, so you need to make money, because otherwise you're not going to be able to survive. But at the same time, I think there's a delicate balance that I think should be found here.
Yeah, that's a very good point. The one on mature, I mean, your point about maturity is a point well taken, especially because even the mature players in the space have products that still need work based on their buyers' input. But especially for those that are coming up, there are now more than 1,000 privacy tech startups, according to Crunchbase. So the rest of them are completely immature. And one of the biggest input that the folks in the space, other founders, investors, also domain experts say is that they really need to be responsive to buyers' pain points. And we talked about that earlier. And the only way to do this, to build a product that is responsive to your target buyers' pain points, is one of the ways is to partner with them, like you were saying. So I like that approach a lot. What are some of the I guess I love that, but I'm curious, what are some of the pitfalls that you see when you get pitched? Like one thing that you wish they wouldn't do. And I think this would be valuable feedback to them, because it's like, one thing that they could do to make their pitch, if you could pick one, make their pitch better.
I think some may be the overselling, that again,
Okay.
of overplaying, and the maturity and the ability of a tool to do stuff. One other thing is maybe spending a little more time in building the right team on the other side. For instance, we spoke about the leveraging other groups and other teams, and we know very well, for instance, if you're rolling out a tool for ROPA, for instance, you would need someone from IT, you need InfoSec to review the tool, and so I think it would be helpful for a CPO if one were able to say, hey, what's the internal team? What are the internal stakeholders that you need to convince of the quality of our offerings? Who do we need to talk to? And then help the CPO. I mean, the CPO could think about that. Maybe they don't need to be prompted, but if they don't, then tell them, hey, why don't we work together in seeing what's the dream team that we want to be talking to, because otherwise they have to pitch to the CPO, and then the CPO goes to the CISO has a bunch of questions, and you have to come back, or the CIO similarly, or you fall in love with a certain offering and you don't think about certain questions because maybe you're a lawyer like me, not a technology expert. Maybe you don't ask certain questions, and then when you go to the CISO, the CIO, they ask some questions, and you go like, "Ooh, I didn't think of this." And so I think if really encouraging the interdisciplinary approach on the front of your on the side of your potential customer would be helpful.
Yeah, help the customer make the case internally, and
Exactly.
just make it easier to.
And also putting immediately in front of the customer. I mean, if you have your information security expert, you're going to have that person on the phone, right? So if the CISO asks the clever question or the nasty question, then you'll have someone who's going to be able to come in and go like, "Oh, I actually designed these products, and I know, and I mean,
Yeah.
explain that," so that you're not just talking to the marketing person or to the salesperson, but you're also talking to someone who knows all the mechanism in the back and how the product actually works.
Yeah, and I think that highlights how cross-functional privacy tech buyers are. Well, privacy is cross-functional, but so are privacy tech buyers, and vendors, the startups themselves have visibility into this. So whatever they can do to shed light on who the different personas are based on their outreach to different customers, to then help you make the case internally and assemble the dream team of cross-functional decision makers.
So they could start by asking questions such as, okay, do you have a data governance organization in your company, and questions like that, and you will get out the information, and then you could help your potential customer and your CPO to build that bench of people that need to look at their offering.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot here that is going to be very helpful in the white paper, and so thank you for that feedback. Before we start to wrap up, I can't believe like almost half an hour has passed. I feel like we can talk for hours. Before we start to wrap up, I'd love to ask you a set of lightning round questions. And this is just like fun and short and pithy questions, if you're game.
Sure.
When you're thinking about the future of the privacy tech industry, this emerging nascent industry, you feel optimism or cynicism? Pick one.
Optimism.
Awesome. What is one consumer privacy tech that you personally use? You don't have to name a brand. You can just tell us what it does.
I manage my location features.
Awesome. Oh, yeah. I love that. Me too. What privacy tech solution, it can be business or consumer, would you like to see built that doesn't exist yet today?
I'd like to see something that facilitates and makes access management easier. Access privileges and access protection and granularity of access. And I don't know whether this could be a single piece of technology or whether it should be technology that is in every environment that processes data. But I find that every time I talk about access management, every solution is incredibly manual, it requires a lot of coding, or requires a lot of expertise, or is impossible. So yeah, I think that the ability of better access control would be.
I actually have a follow-up question to that. I know this is supposed to be lightning round, but this is one of the categories that intersect between security and privacy tech is access management. And so I'm curious, like, what are some of the privacy limitations that you're seeing when you look at existing tools that are kind of looking at access management from an IT or InfoSec perspective? What are some of their privacy limitations that are missing?
I don't see a lot. I don't. Maybe I'm because I'm ignorant and I don't know enough. But I don't see.
I don't think that's okay.
I don't see a lot of attention to the type of data. I see access is still mostly considered, okay, how do companies manage access? Well, is this an employee? Is this a valid employee? Are they in this role? And then a few things. And then once the door is open, then there is no granularity. So I don't see it really really done with the data in mind.
Yeah, so that's I think it was I mean, if I'm misquoting Anne, forgive me, but I think that was I had a conversation with former Nike CPO Anne Bradley, and she was saying the same thing about, the granularity of data type of permissions as opposed to record type or persona type. So I guess the things that the laws have, the GDPR, CCPA, like they talk about different data types, sensitivity, children's health, all of that stuff. So I guess we need some of these built into the products that, these old tools didn't really account for because the laws weren't in existence yet. So if anyone's listening out there, go build this. And then last, before we start to wrap up, if there's a, metaphorical billboard out there that could reach, I don't know, millions or billions of people, what is one privacy message you'd like to impart to them through this? You could write one message in that thing that millions or billions of people could read.
Oh gosh, I need some time to be able to synthesize it. I think that a message
doesn't have to be short.
Well, so I think that if you're not paying attention to your privacy, you're having an impact on society. You're not just having, because I think the way we've been looking at privacy and we still do is very individual centric, meaning very transactional, like, my data is my data, I'm giving it or I'm getting, or someone is getting it and someone is and it's always seen as a one-to-one relationship. And I think what makes privacy really one of the biggest problems of our time, if not the biggest, is that everything that you do when you're paying attention to privacy or not paying attention to privacy, you have an impact on the society we live in. And by that, I mean an impact on democracy and people's safety. And so that I would need to craft it a little better. Maybe one of those marketing people will need to help me. But again, I think for me, because a lot of people think like, oh, it's fine. I don't mind because I get the benefit out of sharing my data and out of providing my data or out of certain, openness with my data. But the point is, it is I don't know whether I can use a metaphor, but it is a saying, okay, well, I'm sick, I'm going to go out and infect a lot of people because ultimately they'll do a lot of medical research with coming out of that. No, really, it doesn't work like that. So again, what you do impacts not just you, but your privacy is the world, is the safety and the security of the world.
Yeah, that's one of the fascinating areas of privacy right now that interests me. I think there was that paper, and I actually don't know who wrote it, but basically saying what you're saying, which is privacy is not just an individual right, but also a societal value. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. So thank you for reminding me to go back to that and unpack that maybe during the holidays, some light holiday reading.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot that's coming out, and I mean some of the language that's coming out now, talking about corporate surveillance and all that, is stemming from that. So the idea that ultimately, when individuals being not being I want to say careless, because careless sounds like a criticism, but individuals maybe not paying a lot of attention to what happens with their data ultimately are as if they were polluting a well of drinking water, and then nobody can drink. It's not just you, it's bad for everybody. So
yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I think that's the perfect takeaway. Privacy affects society. There's so many things that I wanted to get back to, so maybe I'll pick one more, which is, help your customers make the case internally to a cross-functional group of decision makers when it comes to buying privacy tech. But really, that point about privacy affecting society is a big one. So thank you for sharing that with us today, Paola. If there's anything that you would like to share with the TROPT audience, any parting words, any calls to action that you might have, any, where they can find you if you want to be found, that's your privacy choice, obviously. I'd love to give you this time to.
I think we already gave a lot of calls to action to these poor privacy tech people, so they already have a lot of homework to do between interoperability interoperability and all that. So I think we covered the things that are important. I am on LinkedIn, so always happy. And
Awesome.
I am passionate about privacy. It is definitely an area that continues to grow on me, and I love it more every day. So I'm always happy to, and that's one of the reasons why you also asked what's the interest in talking to startups. I'm just like, it's just fun to hear how people are grappling with some of these issues. I would say definitely continue to cultivate the connection between privacy and security, not just because it makes it easier to get funding, but also because I think people that have security experience have a very strong individual credibility. So as a founder, if you have a security background, obviously you come across as having some maybe added credibility when you're moving into the privacy field. So that's it, and good luck, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Paola. If you guys want to read more about Paola's insights and other privacy domain experts and founders and investors' insights, check out our white paper. We'll share a link to that in the comments. If you want to get involved in TROPT, there's so many ways to do that. We will have our flagship / biggest event. That's typically our Data Privacy Day, Data Privacy Week event. So that's in January. We'll also share a link to that if you want to join us early next year for Data Privacy Week. And, you can find us at riseofprivacytech.com. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you again, Paola. Take care.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.